it starts to add up, and it works
Yeah.
too. I've seen some of your podcast videos. Good work you're doing there.
Oh, you have. Thank you. Wow, I'm so impressed and surprised. That's very nice to
Oh,
hear, of course.
I know you never hear anything. It's like we're shouting out into the void, and we're not sure if we're making an impact, but slowly but surely, I hope we are.
I hope so too, because to be honest, almost every day I'm asking that question: Am I making a difference? Should I be doing what I'm doing? Is it really worth it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's difficult, but I think we have to. Otherwise, we have to. I remember thinking about this many years ago. A big fan of science fiction. I thought, well, I can either try to go to Mars or I can try to make Earth better. So I figured, oh, I'll spend my life trying to make this planet better because I'm not sure I'm going to make it to Mars.
Yeah, to be more honest to you, I think Elon Musk is very good at hyping stuff up, and Mars is a perfect example. So, first of all, Mars is like as close to hell as one can possibly imagine. And we're never going to find a better heaven than where we are today. And secondly, the idea that you're going to take millions of people from here to there is, from a physics point of view, like utterly ridiculous. So, yes, some
Yeah.
people would go to Mars, I have no doubt about that, but they would be far and few in between. And so, the vast majority of us better make do and the best of what we got right here, right now.
This is true. This is true. I mean, I like to see humanity expanding. I think that's a sign of health and strength in a species. But so far, it's just our robots that are expanding. So maybe that's the next generation of life.
The other problem is that the physics doesn't work from the meat body point of view, right?
Mm,
Once you get to those very fast accelerations, once you start talking to getting as close to the speed of sound and all that stuff, not sound,
mm,
light,
yeah, yeah.
then these acceleration and deceleration, radiation, all kinds of other issues don't make for a good, comfortable travel that lasts, spans thousands of years in our meat bags. So we either
This,
have to find a way to be cryonically preserved while the duration of the trip lasts for thousands of years, or we have to be able to upload ourselves and travel in a digital form,
that would
because
be
the meat
interesting.
bags not very durable, very picky, slow, small margin of survivability, and all that
This is
stuff.
true. And generally, anytime you're exploring a new world, the first explorers die. It's
Violently,
not,
often, yeah.
it's a tough business. Hi, Gita.
Hello,
You're
nice
still
to
awake.
see you. Nice to see you again. Hi. And Nicola, is there any way that I can hear you on more than only one ear?
Unfortunately, well, okay, let me try something and you tell me if this works. I think there might be. Just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can do this. Uh,
Sandeep, you made it.
is this working now on 2 channels or is it still on 1 channel?
No, it's still only my left ear.
Still only
Hello,
one.
everyone.
Oh,
Hello,
hello.
Sandeep.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Sandeep.
Hi, how are you, Al?
Well, pretty fine.
And you made it. It's what, a quarter past 4 where you are? No, it's a quarter to 2, yeah?
It's you're right. Yeah. It's almost midnight.
Yeah.
So, Gitta, I'm not sure I can change any more settings here, but I think The one channel that I'm giving you hopefully should be good enough.
Yes. You motivate me to listen even more to you.
Oh, you hear everybody? That's the trick. Make them struggle and then they'll go for it with like everything.
Nicola, this is one of my favorite parts about working internationally and with wonderful people is that, yeah, just say on the streets of America, people are trying hard not to listen to each other, but we are the people who are trying hard to listen, to understand each other. And I think that it makes a world of difference.
I think the streets of America are scaring people all over the world. We in Canada are scared we're too close to you guys, to be honest. There's some jokes going around that we need to build a big wall to protect ourselves from the Americans, whether with respect to politics or whether with respect to COVID. So half jokingly, half seriously, Canadians are very concerned about America.
As are we. I don't know.
Because as one of our prime ministers said in the 70s, living next door to America is like sleeping with an elephant. Every time the elephant sneezes, we have a thunderstorm.
Well, maybe Canada can come down and take over the US. We need some sensible leadership around here.
Yes, or maybe we found some candidates we could send to Mars.
Well, you laugh, but that's a lot of how America got started. You had a lot of English discontents, religious groups said, well, we've had it here with this Protestant thing. We're going over to check out a new world. And that probably cooled things down in England also. So
yes, but then the problems will show up later at some different places.
Oh, don't get me started.
That reminds me of hitchhiking, Hitchhiker's Guidebook. I don't
Galaxy,
know.
yes.
Yes, I don't know the title in English, where we put all those
coiffeurs,
super fluent people
Phone
and tell
operators.
them, please,
We don't
be
need
the
you.
pioneers. Very good.
We'll figure it out, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're waiting for David, is that right?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
And Julene?
And Julene, yes.
I'll be in the green room.
Oh no, David is not joining.
David
this
Wood?
one.
Are you talking about David Wood?
No, he's not joining this
Julene?
one. Yeah. Julene. She said she will make it. It's late.
Anyway, we have
I don't know.
5 minutes.
I don't know why anybody would be late. I don't know that at all.
We were all concerned about you, Steve. You got mails from everybody, so you know we love you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm touched. I'm going to blame the fires. Oh, wait a minute. What did I blame last time? Oh, I'll blame something else. Where's my book of excuses here? My dog ate my homework. That's it. I don't know. I'm gonna have to, if I keep this up, I'm gonna have to get multiple clocks on my computer desktop to tell me what time it is in the various parts of the world.
Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, Gitta, your team had already attached the world clock to the homepage, which I thought was a nice touch, right? Where people could look up their time zone and see the time difference.
Did we?
Well, I thought so because it.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was thinking it's a very nice touch.
Yeah. The Technic team is fantastic. Yeah, great. Thank you, Nicola, for that information. I did not know this.
So, Steve, that excuse doesn't even work.
At least I got the right day.
They've everything.
Are you sure?
Germans, of course, they thought about everything.
Yeah, it's worse, Nicola. Martin lives in Switzerland. this is a combination of punctuality and rigid thinking.
Or I was doing some work in Germany, and you work in Germany, like, oh, you want a pencil? You need to talk, you need to fill out these forms in triplicate. And then I go to Austria. Oh, there's some money for, here, we'll just give you the money and we'll fill out the forms later. Like,
yeah.
But where would we be without organization? But that actually brings up something that I will bring up is, oh, no, we're almost ready to start here. I'll tease it. It seems to me there's a Bildung, what am I thinking? A contradiction, a Bildung paradox, because the more we have Bildung, the more we improve ourselves, the more we can do. And yet for our society, the better we run our society, perhaps the more fit in we are. And so the less flexibility we have as individuals. I don't know, something I'll bring up.
Well, maybe if you compare the United States and Germany, but Canada is somewhere in between. So we are not so rigid as the Germans, obviously, and we're not so libertarian as the Americans, but we enjoy kind of the golden mean, if you will. We have the freedom and individuality, but and some rigidity, but so our constitution or Charter of Rights is about law, order, and good governance. It's not the pursuit of liberty, you know, so we have law, order, and good governance, but yet we're very kind of free.
You know, Nicola, I just did an analysis of the Constitution of the United States. It's not systemic at all, which might explain some of our chaos and confusion. But it's 1:45 or 10:45 or something like that.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Just arrived. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, cool.
Good to see you back.
Yeah.
Yes, welcome back, Julene. Nice to have
Thank
you.
you. You too. Nice to see you again.
Presented from Germany and Switzerland. We start at the point. Yeah, great to have you all here. Very warm welcome to the Stream Around the Clock conference. We Need a Change, organized by FORMWELTen-Institut in cooperation with Leanbase, the largest platform for lean and agile organization in Germany. And we are starting this time with the topic Bildung, which is my absolutely concern and my most important topic. So I'm very, very happy to be here. And before we start, we would like, Kristin and me as the presenters of this session, we would like to give you a short introduction so you know who we are, for those who have not met us yet. Not too many here, but anyway. Kristin, would you like to start?
Thank you, Martin. Yes. Hello, a very late night. Hello tonight to all of you. So just a few sentences of my professional history and why I'm working with Gitta and FORMWELTen-Institut. I've worked first about 10 years as an executive search consultant, and then I was no longer satisfied by accompanying well-earning people into even better paid jobs. So I started my journey, which I'm still on. And the central realization in the following 10 years, now in the focus as a coach, facilitator, and conscious business trainer, is that we should pay more attention to the effects of our thoughts and actions, even become as a mankind more conscious and act more sustainable. And that's why I'm so happy to be Gitta's right-hand woman in the organizational field and to contribute to this conference and to the development of FORMWELTen-Institut. Thank you. Martin.
Yes, Kristin, it's wonderful to have you here. Some words about me. With my company, which is named Participation Rocks, and as a working out loud coach, I'm supporting organizations to develop participatory learning and working settings. And I organize and conduct bar camps and interactive events like this. And that's another reason why I'm very glad to to be invited to support this wonderful conference. So we have some slides, but not too much. But maybe before we start, some words about the hidden agenda of this conference. As we face many things we have to change, where change is urgently required, we come across the fact that there are lots of, or actually these 4 currents, which can make a contribution to this change, but they cannot if they don't talk to each other. So it was Gitta's idea to bring people from these 4 currents together to talk to each other, to get into a dialogue and to find common ways to implement the required change. And before we start with this conference, some introduction to the FORMWELTen-Institut as the organizer of this conference. The aim of FORMWELTen-Institut is to promote specialized, renewing, innovative research projects and applications with and from the fields of humanities systems theory and scientific mathematical theory of complex systems. The main focus and central motive of our work is the development and construction of bridges in space and time, in communication and mind, to carry both science and humanities into the future, to evaluate achievements effectively, to critically analyze what needs to be provided and shape the world in an active cooperation. Or was it a radical cooperation, as we learned earlier this day? And under the URL on the bottom of this slide, you can find more information on the FORMWELTen-Institut. So that's the agenda for this last conference of today and the first part of tomorrow. After introducing FORMWELT and the topic, we will now start to introduce the speakers, the guests. And afterwards, we will start with the keynote by Nicola. And after the keywords, the guests are invited to give statements to the keynote and to the topic of this conference. And you are invited to do this in a German alphabetical order by the last name. Sorry. And after this, we will have a short bio break, giving you the opportunity to take something to drink, some coffee, some water, some whatever. And after this, we will start with an open dialogue between all of you. And of course, we are streaming this event via YouTube, and the YouTube channel audience, which is invited to ask questions. And we will put these questions from the channel into the dialogue as well.
Yeah. One thing, the keynote is mine. Nicola is tomorrow.
Oh, sorry. So my list was a bit mixed up. Sorry. Okay, so we will start. Yes, the keynote is yours. And we will start with the introduction. And Kristin, you start with the introduction of Gitta, right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Martin. So I'm very pleased to introduce Gitta, though everybody of us know Gitta already, but maybe there are some people out there in the live chat, via YouTube, who doesn't know so much about her. So Gitta is a German researcher about systems in cybernetics, and she co-developed the linguistic system FORMWELT and the polyvalent logic of cognition Weltform. She's also an international FORMWELT speaker, co-founder of the FORMWELTen-Institut, and recently became panel member of the ongoing UN WAAS, World Academy of Arts and Science, conference in the topic of strategies for transformative leadership. Gitta it is very important for Gitta that everybody knows that she loves stracciatella ice cream. And she lives in Lüchow, Germany. And for me, she's a very, very inspirable person with an admirable clear language ability. And she has the energy of a marathon runner. Her fourth panel today.
Thank you, Kristin. So, and I will introduce Nicola, who is not holding the keynote tonight. Sorry, Nicola. Nicola is author, futurist, and speaker. His Conversations with the Future is an international bestseller, and his popular Singularity FM podcast is the reason why Danaylov has been called the Larry King of the Singularity. I very much like the question Nicola triggers in his LinkedIn profile. And I will read out these questions now. I really like them. What if your car doesn't need a driver anymore? What if we don't need to age and die? What if machines get smarter than us? What if your toothbrush gets smarter than you? Which is a horrible. What happens to your business? What happens to you? Because no matter who you are or what you do, the future will always find you. Question is, will you find the future?
So it's up to me to introduce Julene Siddique the second time today. Julene holds an MA from London University, and she studied medical anthropology. Sorry, Julene, if I do some mistakes, because it's quite
That's
late
okay.
and there are so many words were really pronounced not so easy. Anthropology of development and anthropology of music. That's what I found really impressive. Further to this, she worked with the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research to develop a social systemic framework, marrying social sciences with system sciences. She invented the tonal spatial musical system and the rhythmic temporal musical system, and created the groundbreaking musical nutrition framework for how the benefits of music operate for different people, contexts, and conditions, and founded the Nada Brahma platform. She's passionate about engaging music arts in psychosomatic and biosocial frameworks for health, consciousness, and systemic social impact. Very interesting. Warm welcome, Julene.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now it's up to me to introduce Sandeep to us. Sandeep is a well-trained neuroscientist with a strong background in biochemistry and biomedicine. He was honored with a PhD degree in biotechnology from the most prestigious institution, the capital of knowledge, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, UP, India, in the year 2015. His research interests are in neurodegenerative diseases, in particular Alzheimer's disease. He has more than 9 years of experience in neuroscience and biomedical research. He has used animal model system to investigate the therapeutic potential for Alzheimer's disease using synthetic as well as natural compounds in Drosophila as a model system. Great to have you here, Sandeep.
So last but not least of these great guests tonight, it's Stephen Wallis, the second time today. Stephen is a Fulbright alumnus, international visiting professor, award-winning scholar, and director of the Foundation for the Advancement of Social Theory, researching and consulting on knowledge, theory, policy, and strategic planning. An interdisciplinary thinker, his publications cover a range of fields, including psychology, ethics, science, management, organizational learning, entrepreneurship, policy, and program evaluation, with dozens of publications, hundreds of citations, and a growing list of international co-authors. Stephen lives in California, where the beauty and the wines are balanced by the earthquakes and the wildfires. He enjoys playing chess, fencing EP, and riding his sidecar, Rick Igor. Welcome, Steve.
So, and now,
Very pleasure to be here.
fine. And now finally we can jump into the program, and I would ask Gitta to hold her keynote.
Yes, thank you very much. I have something to share, but before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm about to do. I already presented our work in the other conferences, but this one is really dear to my heart because, in my opinion, everything is about proper education, with which I mean a systemic education, an education that helps people to communicate, an education that helps people to take responsibility as a citizen of their nations and even more as a citizen of the planet. So my husband and I, we have met in 1988, and I was back then thinking about creating a language. I was inspired by neurolinguistic programming back then, found metamodel very, very interesting, the other stuff not so much. And I thought about creating a language out of basic concepts of philosophy, sociology, and psychology. And then I went to Ralph with it, very psyched about this idea to create something that helps with education. And he said, good idea. I started with the same thing. We have to take the mathematics in because we need the machines on board in order to create something that in the end helps with synergy of man and machine. So we started creating a polyvalent logic of cognition on which we set up this language. So the language we created has a mathematical foundation. I actually speak this language right now, and you understand me quite well, but it is based on a semantically and formally self-sufficient linguistic system, a coding language for languages and meaning, which can be spoken by man and machine. The very idea back then was the question, what will we do when climate change actually comes when we have not changed? We saw how the internet developed, and it was very, very early, very clear that this will not lead to the best ideas we had back then when FidoNet started, where people actually came together and actually talked about problems and solutions. It was very clear we will have to deal with more advertisement, we will have to deal with more social fragmentation. Yes, all the stuff we see in the yellow press will happen online on a far more broader scale, leading to a communicative giant waves polarizing all of us. And this will lead to even more problems we have to deal with, and keeping us from solving the problems we actually have to solve coming with climate crisis. And now we see that the first waves of climate crisis are leading to even further destruction of nature, while people are fighting online about left or right wing problems, about conspiracy theories, ignoring the fact that the mass migration already has started. And this all can be, in my opinion, reduced to one single fact, that we are not properly equipped cognitively. With a lack of systemic education and knowledge, with a lack of concepts about systems theory and how autopoietic and self-referential systems differentiate themselves under whatever conditions they are facing, we need to create something that actually can bring people together in a far more clearer way, and that helps to emancipate the individual, young and old, into his or her own semiosphere. That was the very idea. So we created this language. We started in 1988. The first version of this language was ready around about 1992, 1994. And then we worked on it further. The idea was to, in the end, create a global communication platform where people can meet and where children can teach, not only learn, but teach others about what they know, where they can teach adults, where children can be freed from stupid teachers and stupid curricula, where they can learn systemic and logical concepts from the very beginning, which means nothing less than helping children not to become these stupid adults we are today. Because children are born with a natural ability to think systemically, to think logically. That is what they do when they build their towers out of building blocks. They think in relations and they think in logical concepts. They do not know the words, but that's not necessary. We are all, we have all evolved in this gravitational shaft, which comes with some limitations to our cognitive freedom. And one of this is the wonderful ability to think logically, and the other is to think systemically. So we created a language that integrates concepts of systems theory, constructivism, model theory, theory of science, mathematics, logic, and so on. And we started from scratch, which means we started with the evolution of the human being itself. I'm a little bit tired from all this talking today. I'm very sorry. The logic of cognition behind it reflects the way we construct our world. So we created a language that will help everybody to explore one's own mind, one's own concepts with the very question, how does this thing work for you? What do you do when you do whatever you do? I will now open my sheets. Some of them, some of you already know. I will just use them to help me to give you some core ideas about what we have planned over the years. One moment. First, I want to read to you a text Dr. Martin Frick, we just talked to him, from UN Climate Forum and Food Summit, has written. Bildung, education leading to individuals self-emancipated in their own semiosphere is my title, and he wrote, FORMWELT is basically a tool that enables children, adults, organizations, even artificial intelligence to learn systemically by breaking up complexity into a set of simple references. This tool can be applied by humans simultaneously in every language imaginable. It doubles as code for computing, which opens a world of possibilities. Empirically, we are happy to experience how individuals with basic education could empower themselves to understand and communicate complex issues and argue on eye level with experts. That's a point that is really, really important to me. FORMWELT allows to break down complexity by creating a step-by-step set of simple and easy to understand actions. Every one of those actions can be easily learned, and with every new reference, the confidence of individuals, that was easy, I can do that, increases. I have done workshops with people from the street, with cleaning women, with people working in factories, etc., in order to test how potent the language and Bildung's platform we offer here are. And I must say, I was psyched when I understood that this actually works and helps people to deal with complex concepts they need for complex times. For example, contingency or complexity, because FORMWELT is built like Lego with concepts. People can use these concepts, these Lego bricks, to build their own concepts. And when you do that with a concept like complexity, this thing is yours. You have built it in your mind, and this means you can do actually what you're talking about. And it is fascinating to see when people with and lower educations start to talk about contingency and system and complexity and stuff like that, and really feel comfortable in this and understand this is not hard to learn. And that is something that happens with FORMWELT, with every concept, because that is how it's built. It's built as a coding language. The background why we created this, you can see on this sheet all these wicked problems we are confronted right now. When we look, for example, to ISET Foundation, Dr. Sandeep Singh will tell us about later, we see that all of this is something that actually afflicts especially the poor. Poverty stands in the middle of everything, and we have to do something. Yeah, and we see that ideologization, an increasing narcissism, climate change, concentration on user friendliness and technology instead of challenging people more, all of them lead to one thing: increasing the problems of our time, and all of them are caused by a lack of consciousness for the very concept people work with, because people do not learn to listen and they do not learn to read properly. They learn sign language, and this is a car and this is something like that, but only philosophers and others with higher education, or people with almost less to no education, are capable of working with concepts of high clarity. So our solution, our proposal is FORMWELT, and to FORMWELT led the idea, I will not do everything here. FORMWELT led to the idea, the other way around, to FORMWELT led the idea that the next society, or how I call it, reality emulation, where we for the first time in the history of mankind construct a reality in synergy with machines, and machines start to emulate actually reality themselves. We have to understand that we have entered emergence. And when we enter emergence, we need emergent concepts. We cannot solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. That will not work. We need something completely new. And our idea was to create something that cuts vagueness, that helps to reduce misunderstanding to a level of none, on reference level. We need conscious, precise, and complex communication at the same time. And we need conscious redesign of cognitive functions and processes. And we need to raise complexity in language to answer increasing complexity in world. So, what is FORMWELT? As I said, FORMWELT is a semantically and formally self-sufficient linguistic system. It is a coding language for language and meaning, which can be spoken by humans and artificial intelligence. FORMWELT is a model, and that is important, to orientate cognitive functions. This sounds very technical, but actually it's really easy, and even aliens can learn FORMWELT. Because it is semantically and formally self-sufficient, we need nothing out of FORMWELT to create whatever phenomenon we wish to reference in FORMWELT. It subsists. It's created of 320 core references. Like a coding language, you can use them to create new concepts. And if aliens land on this planet, we can give them FORMWELT, and then if they are slightly similar to us, they can learn FORMWELT, because one concept leads to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, until you are at the very beginning of the first concept. And then you can start communicating in it. I think this is something Stephen Wolfram had in mind when he created the language for the movie The Arrival. This is something one of our friends has created just to demonstrate how this can work. Imagine they are children and they are creating a new language in order to not lose the concepts they had as children, and they create something like that, and it can be translated directly into FORMWELT references, as here are already translated into a first icon-based language. We will motivate children all over the world to participate in a global challenge to create new languages with the help of FORMWELT, and we will see what comes out of it. It will be very, very exciting. Here is a language Peter Hofmann has created. He is an autistic person, and he created this with this language. It's his own. Just as an example, often alienated are dyslexic people, autistic people, children, mentally challenged people, and people recuperating from stroke or functional illiterates. And we need all people on this planet to solve the coming problems. And that the FORMWELT is translatable in every language whatsoever. Even more, you can create new languages. So dyslexic people, for example, do not have to be cut out. We can, they can enter FORMWELT platform when it's finally created, and can start talking to people talking in English and in Japanese or whatsoever, and can learn and communicate with them. This I already told you. Here are some applications of language and platform. The most important, I think, in the end will be self-emancipation, because we need a self-emancipated individuals. But education, thinking and intelligence, AI and robotics and so on, you can read it later. I can send you the paper, and the people who are viewing this will see it. These are some of the applications possible with FORMWELT to help. For example, here with value determination, we will create an AI that analyzes text for the density of concepts, which can be done with FORMWELT on FORMWELT Online. So we can help people to differentiate bullshit papers from papers actually written and constructed from people who know what they are talking about. That is a joke Julene and I often make, that we are about to create a bullshit detector. Here's some other aspects very important. Bildung. Bildung is a German and a Northern European concept that does not only mean education, it means more. Education simply means you build up a knowledge structure, but Bildung means that in the end it leads to an individual that really is emancipated and feels responsible for social development. So longevity and health are two very, very important parts of Bildung, because we need the change of the cognitive structure of researchers and everybody working with FORMWELT, and it can help with clarity and simplicity, very important, rising intelligence and precise communication, vulnerability, sustainability and resilience, and people will learn to realize their potentials. Also cognitive relaxation. When you know your concepts, you can relax. Relaxation of complicated relationships, the same thing. What you know you are talking about, you can listen better. It helps with conflict and stress management and so on. But here, self-education. These are the points I want to talk to you about. Everybody can become everybody else's teacher, child or adult whatsoever. Even AI, children and adults from all over the planet can study together. Volunteers can help children, students, and adults with their studies online. General global curricula can be created with the help of the children and students, and with the help of corporations, politicians, consultants of all kinds. Communication on FORMWELT Online will become a continuing learning process. Decision-making structures can be analyzed with the help of FORMWELT references. Effectiveness of thought, communication, and acting can be analyzed. Equality and continuing innovation of learning can be guaranteed. Effective learning processes can be referenced and thus taught to everybody. The quality of teaching will rise on a global scale. And another important point, immigrants can make a living out of their knowledge. Integration will become a multi-dimensional communication process. We all can emancipate ourselves from bad teachers. Competence of knowledge can be valued through FORMWELT value determination. International global study groups can be established on FORMWELT Online. So in the end, we can think about language for systemic thinking, department for systematics, universities, academy for citizen scientists we can integrate into the scientific community and communication processes. FORMWELT designer skills, shortages, etc., etc. And what we will have when we have FORMWELT platform is people capable of systemic and computer programming, because FORMWELT is a coding language and they will learn it playfully alongside all the other concepts of system theory, etc. I told you about, they are learning there. So jazz is freedom, you think about that, was something Thelonious Monk said about jazz. Jazz means everybody brings him or herself into the dialogue, in this case of music. Language is nothing else but self-rhythmization of social system with the individual, and thus a synergy that now can integrate AI. Systems research is innovation research, and that is something we can do on a global scale with the help of FORMWELT and FORMWELT Online platform. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Gitta. So, in alphabetical order, the next one is Nicola.
Yes,
Nicola,
I
do
got a
you
little
want to
worried
share?
when. Yes, I got a little worried when someone said that I should be the keynote speaker, because Gitta is the expert here and I'm definitely not, neither German nor an expert in the field. But here's my thinking and my thoughts on this very interesting and very important sort of Germanic Northern European concept of Bildung. And the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what happened? Why is this concept not everywhere around the world if it's so great? So what happened was that at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, the Industrial Revolution was kind of really taking off, and productivity was exploding and factories were getting more and more efficient. And that made industrialists very worried about two major problems that they were expecting to be facing soon. Number one was that they were going to run out of workers, because and they were concerned that if there's not enough workers to bring into their factories more and more all the time, they would simply have to increase the wages, pay higher wages for the workers that they already had. Their second biggest fear was that they were not going to have enough customers, that they were going to run out of customers who would buy their millions and millions of industrialized products, which were coming to market at a cheaper and cheaper price all the time. Now put that into context to understand it better. In the 1880s, the average person owned one pair of shoes and two pairs of pants. And so you can see how, if you're an industrialist who produces millions upon millions of products at a cheaper and cheaper price, you'd be concerned that the demand for your ever-increasing supply may not be there. And so they decided to do something about it. And that something about it is called the public school system, as it was built by people such as Andrew Carnegie, very major industrialists, Woodrow Wilson, who later on became president of the United States. And that system was designed to address those fears and to accomplish two things. Number one was to train kids to become compliant, to become like factory workers, to make them sit in a rows, to make them fit in, to make them follow instructions, to make them sit quietly for hours, to make them wait for the buzzer at the end of the day, and to make them do what they're told. In other words, to make them obedient. And if they do that, then at the end of the day, they were to expect a reward. You see, this was the 19th century, so that was a very classic Pavlovian approach for rewarding. The second thing that they were intending to do was to teach kids that the best way to fit in and feel good was to buy more stuff. And thus consumerism was born. And education has done a great job at both of those things ever since. Unfortunately, it keeps doing that to this very day, which is why kids call it today school. And if you're a kid in the United States or America, you would know that school is an abbreviation of 6 words that stands for 6 cruel hours of our lives. And this whole system has a major foundational myth, and everybody knows this myth. It's a very popular and common myth. The myth goes like this: do well in school and you will be very happy, you will be very successful, and you will basically be set up for the rest of your life. Well, for starters, but I mean, today I believe most of us here do not believe this myth to be true anymore. Maybe it was true in the late 19th or the 20th century. It is not true for the 21st century. So the question then is, what do we do? Well, for starters, we have to begin by asking some good questions. Questions such as, what is education? Who is it for? How does it work? How does it not work? And most importantly, in my opinion, what is education for? Is it for what the industrialists were intending to accomplish or not? Because you see, the word education comes from the Latin root of iudis, which means, or iudius, which means to draw forth or to bring out. In other words, education is about polishing rough diamonds to bring out their uniquely best individual attributes. But industrial education, modern education, is all about sticking stuff in. It's about putting in. It's about force-feeding kids the information that they're then supposed to basically literally throw up later on their test a week or two down the road. But of course, in the age of Google, when we live in an age when answers are free, that means that basically the value is created at the questions, not at the answers anymore. And because a good question can be literally priceless, because the better the question that we ask, the better the answer that we're going to get. The problem is that we're still teaching kids not to focus on the questions, but on the answers. And we're asking kids to collect dots, not to connect dots. Because one is easy to measure and to test for, but the other makes a long-term difference, and the problem is you have to wait for it to give results for a very long time. One is about fitting in the 20th century, the other is about standing out and thriving in the 21st century. And so we need to move from education to what I call learning, because currently education is basically hustling for a piece of paper that ends up on my wall where, you know, I have traded basically compliance for certification. And that is why education is typically down in heavy institutions, because education can be done to us, but learning can't be done to us, because learning is a choice. It requires an active participation. So learning is done with us, because learning is voluntary. And learning is a skill. It is not a mere useless fact. And once we've acquired learning, we can use it over and over again. So it's very useful. Now, Bildung is about the development of the whole human being. In other words, Bildung aims at addressing the hard question of what education actually is for, holistically. But the thing is that until we agree about what education is for, globally or at least regionally, we are not going to make any positive change within education, simply because most people ignore the question of what education is for, or even if they get to ask it, then there's no consensus. And so I want to finish with a quote from a great educational institution that was around when I was growing up. It was called Pink Floyd. And that institution said this: we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. However, we do need learning. We need learning in a way that 200 years ago was referred to as Bildung. We need learning in a way that 2400 years ago was called ethics, where ethikos means pertaining to one's moral character, nature, or soul. And I hope you guys notice how heavily the Germans, who are expert classicists, borrowed from the ancient Greeks to develop that and come up with that idea for Bildung. And we need learning in the spirit of what is called in South Africa Ubuntu. Ubuntu, which is a philosophical doctrine which emphasizes social unity and generosity of spirit and kindness towards humanity and our fellow human beings. And I believe that if we do that, then maybe we can get our kids to do art. Where, as Seth Godin defines art, art is the creation of something new, something that might not work, something generous that will change us, something that actually matters. Because the future belongs to artists, not factory workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Very important questions and thoughts. Especially I'm a mom of two boys, and I wish that would happen like you told us. So first we have all the speakers, all the guests with primer thoughts. Now, Julene. You have to unmute first, please.
Sorry, do you hear me now?
Thank you.
No, I'm very happy that I stayed awake for this because I'm very passionate about education and cognitive development, and there is in fact significant research that there is a causal link between all our global issues to the educational system. And definitely the new paradigm of education which is emerging is recognizing the relationship of cognitive development to social needs. Very simply, that if we're not equipped cognitively, neurologically to think of solutions, then we very literally can't. So I think it's great that we're bringing up this subject, because it is actually education, if corrected, to support the holistic development of the human being, cognitive development, multiple intelligence, sensory development, social learning, all of these critically important things. That is one solution, that is the solution, long-term solution to solve every problem. Long-term solution because cognitive development, personal, it takes time. It takes time also to change the system. And I've been very involved with future of education and the different movements that are working in this direction. I agree with our previous speaker that yes, there does need to be more consensus. There seems to be a lot of institutes popping up, thought leaders, individual practitioners, and it hasn't quite formulated yet into an alternative educational system because of this different niche methods and ways of working. So I agree there needs to be more consensus. There's a couple of interesting things that I just like to put to Gitta. So in cognitive development, we have key stages. 0 to 3 is a key, absolutely critical neurodevelopmental period. 0 to 3 defines your neurology for the rest of your life. Obviously we know when children are younger, their brains are more malleable. And I have actually a friend who has created a software for brain development. And it's not just for children that came from disadvantaged backgrounds. Everybody has glitches, right? And this software is there to fix the glitches by acting on the cerebellum, which is the back of the brain. And you do that through movement, engaging neuroplasticity, and then hardwiring the new the new wiring. But this is all very sensory movement-based stuff. So I'm fascinated in terms of how FORMWELT would do that with language. That's one thing that's meant, because for actual brain development, it is a sensory process. I don't want to get too much into the science of the brain just yet. So that's one thing that interests me, is how FORMWELT is doing this through language, how much space there is for integrating the sensory methods, right? Because that's really the neuroplasticity, brain development, glitch fixing, opening up new things. That's interesting. But what I do want to acknowledge, regardless of what that answer is that the majority of our technologies are working for the disintegration of human faculties rather than their development. And what is huge, and I think, you know, Gitta, in the midst of her prolific speech, didn't highlight, is that FORMWELT, at least to me, is one of the only technologies I've come across that actively develops cognition, rather than the one-sided approach of just like you are absorbed by technology or entertained by technology, or you put something on and it's affecting you, whereas you're actively engaging and generating a learning experience, having ownership over that learning experience so that you're empowered. This is very critical stuff that I can connect it to social liberation and pedagogy of the oppressed, but I won't do that for right now. But I think it just, Gitta, if I can, so just highlighting the fact that FORMWELT is developing cognition. I have not seen that in very many technologies. There's a lot of research on the opposite happening, but also for the actual brain development, you need to activate the cerebellum, you need the sensory body work. How would that, you know, people who are actually doing the brain development, how would they potentially work with FORMWELT, and how do you connect that to language? I think I just wanted to just throw something at her, just a quick question.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Every autopoietic system self-rhythmatizes. Language at the very foundation. Language at the very foundation is kinestetical. So what we have created is something mathematical, which means there is already music and sound in it. And now people can translate it, for example, into movement, and we can use virtual reality to create landscapes and moving training in order to fill the gaps. That is where constructivism is a very fascinating concept, because constructivism at the beginning means we fill the gaps in our expectation structure with concepts. And where Aboriginal cultures do this with song lines, with music, with narration, etc., we have lost a lot to strictly mechanical and linear thinking. And this can be done with a language that refers to itself, which helps with this rhythmitation, self-rhythmitation. Yeah, and then you can start translating it into dance, into moving therapy in order to fill the individual gap. That is something people have to do with FORMWELT, with the help of FORMWELT. We cannot create everything. We have created the foundation. Yeah, and you can do that, what you asked for, with FORMWELT.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. But I think I just want to highlight that it is so important that we have technology supporting the development of human faculties, right? Rather that is left out of the equation a lot. In fact, the opposite is happening. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julene. Thank you, Gitta, as another moment. So let's listen to the further statements now. Dr. Sandeep Singh, please.
Thank you, Kristin, and thank you all. I'm really thankful to Gitta, who have invited me in this a brilliant conference, where the person from all over the globe and their expertise in the different fields and the all credit goes to Gitta, who is, connecting the globe in a single platform. So thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to tell something about what our foundation is doing in the, educational reform in India. So basically, the ISET Foundation has been established mainly for the promotion of science education, focus in the suburban and the rural part of India. ISET Foundation mission is to improve the quality of the scientific education in India, especially in the rural part of India, and ensure that all the children not only read theoretically, but also strictly do the practical work in the school. It would be accomplished by the working in the collaboration with the government, local communities, parents, teachers, volunteer, and civil society members. So the ISET Foundation's aim is to supplement the science education rather than the replace government efforts. It is quite sure that we'll achieve the advancement in Indian science through facilitate the excellent scientific education, awareness program, promote the innovation, create idea, endorsement, entrepreneurship to develop comprehensive and stewards towards scientific development. So there are few steps which are ISET Foundation is focusing. The vision of ISET Foundation is to develop excellent scientific education, to develop advanced modern technology-based healthcare, to develop scientific technology-based agriculture, to develop scientific lifestyle-based society, and to develop the edge-cutting technology-based research. So this is what about the ISET Foundation is doing in India. And now I'd like to come on the topic that what is the status of education in India, and what was the past, and what is the current scenario, and what should be the future, so that we can, accelerate the things and we can change the things according to time, and we can follow the path of the change, as our topic is the change, to make a change. So the history of the Indian education is that the education has its roots to the ancient ages, where they followed the Gurukul system. As I think you all have heard about this. In India, the ancient system, there was a Gurukul system where the teacher and students lived together and in their houses, and the teacher teach until the teacher felt that he has imparted all the knowledge into the student. And the student, the subject taught varied from the Sanskrit to scriptures, to mathematics, to metaphysics, and the knowledge attained would be passed on to the future generations. However, the system was changed during the colonial era, when the British set up schools that followed a curriculum confined to a subject such as mathematics, science, and other subjects. While the ancient system included more interaction with the nature, and modern system was more classroom oriented, as we all know. So I think the latest trends in the Indian education system is that a typical Indian classroom is characterized by a long hours of lectures, by the teacher, with a very little focus of the student ability to comprehend, whether the student is able to capture the things or not, but he is just trying to deliver the lectures in a time period. And however, the Indian education system today is seeing many technology-driven innovations for the students, like smart classes from the EduCom. In such an example, smart class essentially the digital content library of the curriculum, mapped multimedia arrays, 3D content. So it also enables teachers to quickly assess how much of particular lessons students should have to able to assimilate during the class. Once the topic is covered, the teacher gives the class a set of questions on a large screen, a computer screen, and each student then answer via personal answering devices, whether it's a mobile, a computer, a laptop, whatever the students have. And the smart assessment system, the teacher gets the score right away, and based on that, he or she repeats part of the lesson that students don't appear to have grasped. And another example is that the launch of the YouTube channels. Different, faculty members are individuals are launching the different topics YouTube channel like Edu India, which is an Indian curriculum focused educational channel. Some other players in this sector who have come up with the innovation like Core Education and Technologies, ILFS, HCL Infosystem, Learn Nexta, etc. So we also see a lot more schooling option available today as a replacement to the conventional mainstream system. In one article, Vaibhav Devanathan of Laugh Guru has emphasized that the high level of the stress in students caused by the mainstream schooling. Schools have given rise to various alternative methods of schooling in India, like Montessori school, Krishnamurti schools, and homeschooling, and Gardner's mother model school. And so I think we need to make a change in our education system. So the question, we should make a change. Why this change is required? So in 2014, the India's global education ranking slipped to 93. This, together with a series of scams faced by the Indian education sector, calls for an immediate need to bring reforms in our education system. So Indian education system has been synonymously with the examination, board exam, entrance exam, and the marks, etc. A student in India is left with the option of choosing a science, humanities, commerce, and other subjects as per his or her interest. However, the trend shows that more and more students are opting to go abroad for further studies after completing their post-graduation in India. As per the statistics of the US Council of Graduate Schools, offer admission to an Indian postgraduate students, the admission are up to 25% for 2030 to 2040 from the previous year, compared to the 9% increase in that ratio. So some of the reason for this soaring number of the students not opting India to pursue their further education are lack of top quality program offered by the Indian colleges, and poor quality after teacher who is just trying to compile the things in a time period, and they are not making a complete interest, because the students who are sitting in your class, this is your responsibility to teach each and everyone, not the top class student of the class. So if you are teaching the students and somebody is not grasping, or somebody is not getting the things, then it's your responsibility to take care of that student also. So it's due to poor quality of the teacher, teaching is not considered as a lucrative career option in India. Most of them end up in this career as they couldn't find jobs elsewhere. Outdated syllabus taught in most of the colleges. The lack of the state of art infrastructure in the top colleges. So I think there should be a reforms in India, and that should be begins from the school level only. The school play a vital role in shaping a personal, social, and professional growth. The conventional school in India focus on nurturing the children to face the competitive world outside. Examination and assignments are encouraged by them as tool to access the capability of the students. Whether a child was knowledgeable or not, depending on the marks. But it should not be the criteria, because marks is not the capability of any individual. So whether a child was knowledgeable or not, depending on the marks. Many activities today who oppose the Indian education system are of the opinion that schools teach the student in learning things by rote and not to understand things through application. National survey conducted few years back reveals that the more than 80% of the school principal in India blame rote learning as a reason for the poor standards to learning the student passing out from the schools. Of these, nearly 70% of them felt that the curriculum followed in India today did not give sufficient scope of the creative thinking. So I think the initiative which is Gitta is trying to make a change in the global platform, not only in a single country. So we can make a change in our society, our country, so that it will bring a lot of change in the globally. So I'm trying to do by using our foundation's volunteer and members and whatever I'm trying, and I'm very lucky to connect with the Gitta. So now I'm trying to think more speedily and more fast to do the activities. But this is, the corona time is, sometimes it's good, and for environmental things, we can see the change in their environment, that air index, the air pollution index is very down, and the air is fresh. But economically and individually and as per humanity, it's damaged a lot. Not in India, it's make a very huge damage all over the world. So, but where we personally, I learned several things from the this crisis, that there's economy is not only the important thing, also humanity and the personal capability of helping each other, your lifestyle, our habit as humanity, all these things is important in life. So this is what I think education compiles for. Education is not to get the degree only. It's a compilation of ethics, humanity, and that's why the people called educated when the person have all these quality, not only the higher degree. So I again thank you for all the participants who is listening right now, and I thanks to all the panelists, especially Gitta, who invited me, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. It is so important to bring all perspectives together from different continents, from different cultures. So now we travel to the United States. Steve, you went?
Thank you, Kristin. I want to, before I really get into my topic, I want to touch on something that Gitta said that really deserves emphasis, is that we can think of learning all the little bits of things that we pick up along the way as little puzzle pieces or small pieces of a larger picture. And there's a systemic nature to knowledge.
Yeah.
So the more we learn, the more pieces of the picture we have, the more systemically we can think. And this goes also to Nicola's point about collecting dots versus connecting dots. A colleague wrote a paper on how they're using knowledge mapping in the classroom to evaluate and accelerate student learning by the dots being the concepts and the connections, the causal relationships between them. And this goes back to a whole bunch of research on learning and human development, where the more dots and the more connections we have, the more actionable, useful knowledge we have. And that's what gives us the ability to make things happen. And but rather than focus on relatively normal knowledge, if you will, I thought I'd take a slight shift here. As Sandeep said, it's not just the knowledge, it's also the ethics, those morals, those deeper understandings we have. Because to my view, knowledge and ethics are pretty much the same thing. They both serve as a set of instructions for how we should behave. And a little connection, because about the same time that Wilhelm von Humboldt was building that idea of Bildung in Europe, good old Benjamin Franklin in the soon-to-be US of A was working hard to improve his ethics. And he took some moral virtues and wrote them down in a little book, and he carried that around. And every time he did something virtuous, he would put a little check mark there. And by the end of the week, he would look at that book and see how well he did and make plans to improve himself. And his idea was to make those virtues habitual. But where do those virtues come from? The question, Nicola, the question man. Because throughout human history, those rules of behavior, whether you call them ethics or morals, have pretty much developed by accident. We might imagine two cities in ancient times, one where they just happen to value cleanliness, the other where they do not. And the city that values cleanliness will be healthy and happy and prosperous and expand. And that value of cleanliness expands throughout the world, whereas the city that's not very interested in cleanliness will suffer from waves of disease and maybe fall apart. Well, I mean, that's just one example of the many values and ethics that we have in society that are very complex and quite possibly interconnected. But it comes to us as a rather fragmented list of things. Do this, don't do that. And that's pretty much the way our human minds are organized, or I should say disorganized. We have all these concepts floating around and they're not really well connected. So we can look at improving ourselves by improving our ethics in much the same way as we look at improving ourselves in terms of knowledge. But improving our ethics is very difficult because you can't just go to university and get more degrees, more pieces of paper on the wall and say that you're more ethical, especially today when those ethical stances are highly contested. Which way do we go? How do we know what to do? It's also not necessarily useful, I think, to rely on ancient or traditional ethics because the same problem applies. Do we wash our hands or not? Today we think that that's very important. Back then it was kind of up in the air. So I would like to introduce a new way of looking at ethics that relates also to the broader field of knowledge, as those ethics should be systemic or structural. It's a system of concepts, and that's important because the more that our ethical system is highly interconnected, there are connections between the concepts that we think of as our set of ethics, the more useful that set of ethics will be for making these difficult decisions. So a quick comparison here with knowledge. Who has highly structured knowledge? The physicists, the engineers. If you're launching a rocket, there are three important things to take into consideration on one level: the mass of the payload, the thrust of the rocket, the acceleration of that rocket. And Newton wrote this as force equals mass times acceleration. And we could draw a diagram showing how each of them is related to the other. If you want more payload, you're going to need more thrust. If you want it to reach orbit, you need more acceleration, and so on. The key is that these are all trade-offs that we don't usually think about in terms of ethics or education or knowledge. We generally think of our ethical stances as this is just the way it has to be, and anybody who disagrees with us is wrong and must be exercised or shot at on the streets or something like that, which is not a good way to run a country, in my humble opinion. But understanding those trade-offs for ethics is much more difficult than understanding them for the laws of physics. Do you break a window to get some drugs to save a life? Sure, no question. Do you kill one person to save two people? Do you stop driving your vehicle that uses a lot of gasoline and causes a lot of pollution because it might save 10 people in 50 or 100 years? These are difficult questions that we do not have the answers to. So I don't know either. I don't have the answers, but I do want to say that there's an opportunity to think about our ethics differently. So for those of you who are interested, I would encourage you to take some time after this session to think about your ethics in a different way. Sit down with a piece of paper, write down those concepts, write down what you think is ethical, those activities, those behaviors, and identify the causal connections between them. Some of them might be more short-term or long-term than others. If you find something is difficult to understand, sit down with a colleague or a friend. Surface each of your ethics, your understanding of how the world works. The objective here is to try and identify how all of those ethical behaviors are connected in loops. And the other idea is in surfacing our assumptions and identifying finding those dots and finding the connections between the dots, we develop a better understanding of our ethics. And that process is critical to rethinking, not just do this, don't do that, but what are the trade-offs between doing this and doing that? Now, Wilhelm von Humboldt and Benjamin Franklin were some of the greatest minds 2 centuries ago, but that was 2 centuries ago. The greatest minds of 250 years ago are not enough to move us forward today. We need new insights and interconnected insights. We cannot build a coherent society with our fragmented minds, with our fragmented understandings. We need to figure out all those interconnections. And only then, I think, can some new society, which is past the event horizon, past the singularity, only then can it emerge. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thanks a lot to all of you for sharing your thoughts. I think it's a good point to start in a little break for about 15 minutes. It's almost midnight in Central Europe now. So maybe a quarter past 0, you say 0? Quarter past 12, we would come back, and maybe during this break, while washing our hands or drinking...
Here in India, it's at 3:30 a.m. almost morning.
Okay, and maybe make some thoughts. Which points you would like to have a deeper look into for the second half of the session, so we can start with some points which are might be interesting for some of you or all of you. See you then. Enjoy your break. Quarter past. We will be back. Thank you.
You. Kristin, do you know who is the tech wizard that runs the event? Is it you?
No, it's a lean base. We are a conference is it's like under the roof of lean base, the agile platform for.
But who is running the technical end here behind us right now?
Yes, who opened the Zoom room, etc.
Yeah, who
This
controls
is
it?
Martin.
Is it Martin?
It's
Okay.
Martin. Yes. Do
Yeah,
you have
'cause
any
my
problems?
wife- No, I don't have any problems other than to share with you that my wife warned us that our conversation where we started chatting before the event actually began
Yeah.
was actually live on YouTube. So
Okay.
all that preliminary chat that we had sort of like personally between me and Steve and then you and so on kind of was live streamed on YouTube. So, I mean, I have no problem with that, but generally it may
We
be a
have-
better idea if the moderator cuts that out so there's only the slide that we see
Yeah.
there. And the other thing is also, and unfortunately he's not there yet, so Martin doesn't hear this probably, but the other thing is if we can mute everyone, the moderator can mute everyone.
Mhm.
So for example, when we finished, it's good for all the microphones to be muted from a central location. Then everyone can unmute themselves before they speak. But those two are two good habits. The moderator, the technical moderator, can cut everybody's video feed and cut everybody's audio feed so that, you know, some of us don't get embarrassed by what we say before we
Okay.
thought that the event started
Thank
in a
you.
sort of a private conversation between me and Steve and so on and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, Nicola.
No worries.
The difficulty with the streaming is that it's quite complicated to send. We have to send the link for the live streaming to Leanbase first, and then they embed it on their platform. So if we do it too late, maybe it's too late. But then we have to give you the information that we are already live. That's the other
No,
possibility.
but you can actually control that on the Zoom interface. You can.
Really?
You can, yes, you can mute everyone's microphone on the Zoom interface
Okay.
itself. So Martin can mute every one of us anytime he wants. He can choose to not show our webcams anytime he wants. He's like the director in a movie. He can do all that stuff, you know. So and then the Lean interface will take whatever the feed you're giving them. So if it has no audio or no video, just a slide like we are right now, they will take it. By the way, it's 15, so I would stop right now.
Okay.
So, everybody back again.
Julene is missing.
Almost everybody. Okay. So, yes, but it's already 16 past, so maybe we just start and
Julene
Julene
said
will...
in the chat that she won't be there for the second half.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're right.
I see it now. Okay, so we are complete. Thanks for coming back. Any points you detected while having a break you would like to have a deeper look into?
Yeah, I have like 4 points I want to address with Steve, because we're having such a great conversation even before we began, so we can just continue it, right?
Yes, sure. Feel free.
So the first point, and you know, I'm a stickler for ethics, in the very classical sense of the word ethics, where ethics originally in Greek comes from ethikos, which means pertaining to one's character or nature and soul, according to some interpretations. So what's the difference between knowledge and ethics, and is there one to begin with? And I would say absolutely there must be, because here's the thing, and here's the distinction that I want to bring. Knowledge is knowing how to do something. power is having the ability to do that something. Law is giving you the legal right to do that something. But it is ethics that tells you whether you should or you shouldn't do that something. So you can have the power, you can have the knowledge, you can have the law to do that something. But if you're an ethical choice maker, you have to consider the ethical implications, and you can make a choice despite the fact that the law, knowledge, money, incentives, everything is on your side. You can still choose not to do that. And that's an ethical choice. That's where I'm a stickler. So I have 3 more points. The second one is more of a curiosity point, right? Just for fun, about cleanliness between 2 cities. Well, Steve lives like me in North America, and the sad fact of reality is that when we came, European settlers came to North America, 90% of the indigenous population died from from infectious disease. And the reason for that was because we were dirtier and they were cleaner than us. Because we came from very high concentration of European cities where we used to live very dirty. Europeans in the 16th and 17th century would not take showers for months upon months. And because they were so densely populated together, they were exposed to a lot of different kinds of diseases and bacteria. And they developed resistance. Resistance which, because the native populations of North America did not develop, made them very susceptible to our diseases. So it is not necessarily the case that the clean city would survive under all conditions. Sometimes nature is funny, and sometimes the dirtiest people survive better than the cleaner people. Whereas the local natives, they have a very long tradition of washing in the lakes, especially here near the Great Lakes in Canada and so on. So that's the second point. The third point is, how do we do ethics, and can we do ethics in our life today? My answer is absolutely 100%. It's an imperfect process. It's a flawed process. But it's a daily practice. And that's why I always gravitate towards the origin of ethics. That's why I mentioned the definition, but that's also why I gravitate towards ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, especially things like Stoic philosophy. Because that philosophy, which is the original philosophy, with all my respect towards the Germanic-speaking countries, Kantian philosophy, where we have to argue for hours about what Kant actually tried to say and whether he did say it or didn't say it, you know, is a whole other level, and we can debate. But with the Greeks, things were a lot clearer. And you can take their philosophy and apply it to your daily life today, to your friendship, to your love, to your poetry, to your piety, to your justice, to war, to death, to friendship, to your relationship to the state and the government, your parents, and so on. And finally, about the rocket, right? And Newton's law, and how all we need to know is the 3 laws of, and, you know, mass, acceleration, etc., etc. Sure, we must know Newton's laws. And, you know, I actually had that discussion on my podcast with the founder of Skype, and with Lawrence Krauss, who is a very well-known physicist, who was arguing with me that, you know, basically philosophy is absolutely irrelevant. And my answer to him, and in this context with the rocket to you, Steve, is that still you can have perfect awareness of Newton's laws. You can build the perfect best rocket in the world. The most important decision still is the ethical decision. And that's which way do I point that rocket? Do I point it towards my neighbor, or do I point it towards Mars? And that's an ethical decision, which way you point the rocket. So you can have the best engine, the best acceleration, the best engineering, the best designer. If you screw up the direction in which you're pointing that rocket and you point it towards your neighbor, then you can actually do a lot more damage than you do good. And so all your engineering, all your scientific prowess would not only be damaging, would be dangerous to them and in the long run to you, because then they can do that to you too. And so ultimately, I would still claim that in that case, the best, most important part of the decision doesn't mean the other choices, scientific ones, are irrelevant. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient, because on the layer of that, and it's hard to escape nowadays with our advanced technology, there's always a layer of ethics that, in my view, is unavoidable.
Thank you, Nicola. Very good points, all of them. And you're taking what I basically had a very short amount of time. And so I gave very limited examples. And thank you for expanding those. But to speak to that last point first, I think the key is here, and I think you spoke to it there, where you're talking about your choice which way to point the rocket, or the metaphor I like to use, you know, it's like we have a big cannon, but we're not really good at aiming it. And so we can hurt ourselves or hit the wrong target and hurt innocent people, as we seem to do rather a lot. But that said, you'll notice, going back to your first point, that ethics comes to a choice. Well, laws come to a choice also. And obviously, throughout history, people have made the choice to point their rockets and their cannons at each other. And so I would argue that how to phrase it concisely, ethics are not well enough developed because people come up with different interpretations and make different choices.
It is not the ethics that is not well enough developed. It is the people who are practicing the ethics.
But the people follow the ethics. The people have an ethical set of ethical rules in their heads, and they choose to follow them or not. They make that decision. Just like if you're driving down the street, you can choose to stop at a stop sign or choose to drive through it. But let me try something on you that you might find interesting here. Another way to look at it is that if you're going to launch a rocket using Newton's law, and you choose not to consider force or not to consider mass of the payload, you're going to get very rapid feedback about that choice. Ethics, I think, speaks to those long-term situations. You know, if I start violating traffic laws or I choose to act unethically, I might get away with a lot of stuff. That might not hurt me personally. I might be able to hurt a lot of people and amass a lot of wealth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that might not hurt me personally, but the example that sets, the ripples that sets off down the line is going to make life much worse for a lot of people, which inhibits or limits the sustainability of society as a whole. So I would suggest perhaps that ethics is something that we apply to more longer term decisions, where the outcome is uncertain or we won't know the results of it for perhaps even in our lifetime. If I plant a tree, I won't live to see that tree grow to fruition, but I know that the ripples I set up there, that ethical choice to plant a tree or to use a low carbon emitting car or to not use a car at all, is going to have very long-term consequences that I might not see at all in my lifetime.
Yeah, I would say that ethics is a praxis, is a daily routine for me, at least in theory. And one of the ethical principles, and we have to live it by example all the time. And one of the ethical principles pertaining to your situation, your example here, whether it pertains to traffic lights or cheating in any other way with taxation or, you know, to make money, as you said, to become very successful or what have you, is one good ethical principle that I try to live by is like, if my action is done by everyone else in the world, would I be able and willing to embrace that outcome? If everyone did, because I can cheat here today on this or that thing. I can cheat on traffic, I can cheat on my taxes. But what if everyone embraced that action as a universal principle? What would the effect of that be? And that allows me to put things into perspective and decide how to make that ethical choice. And with respect to whether scientists are aware of even ethics to begin with, making some of the most major decisions in our civilization. Let me share with you a story from Bill Nye, and I'm sure you know that story from the Oppenheimer end because you've heard it. You know, Bill Nye, the science guy, known about very well in North America, not so much in Europe. I interviewed him on my podcast, and I pushed him a little bit on ethics. And turned out his mother worked on the Oppenheimer project, on the Manhattan Project, to bomb Japan. And that, by the way, confirms with many of the recordings and memories that Oppenheimer later shared. But basically, the whole point about dropping, especially the first bomb, no one ever stopped once to consider the ethical implications of what they were doing. Think about this. They're creating the biggest, most powerful weapon in the history of the world. And the biggest thing that happened right after the bomb fell and exploded, they felt relieved that it's not a dud, that it actually blew up, because their biggest concern was not ethically, we're going to kill 200,000 people with a single bomb. Their concern was, what if it doesn't blow up? You know, we've been working on this for 5 years, cost $1 billion, and in the end, we got nothing to show for it. That's the scientific way of actually approaching this. And I would say, to me as an ethicist or a philosopher, it's very sad and kind of worrying that this major civilizational decision, which has ramification throughout the whole 20th century, was taken without a single thought about ethics. And we know that Oppenheimer eventually changed up his mind completely and became a pacifist later on in life. So maybe if he had started thinking about these things originally, things would not be the way they were.
Ethical.
Quite possibly. But remember, the physicists were not the ones who dropped the bomb, and the decision was made by generals and politicians. And as I recall, not as I recall personally, but from history, there was a trade-off considered. The idea was that by killing, hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, we could save double or triple that number of lives of soldiers probably on both sides. So I'd argue with that a little bit, but in general, I very much agree with your overall premise, is that we need to think broader. And this goes back to a sort of science one or traditional science approach of trying to look at smaller and smaller connections and testing them again and again and again, instead of graining out to see how many different dots and how many different connections we can bring together. And therein, I think, lies the path to greater wisdom. Good stuff.
Yeah, as Nicola was saying, that ethics is not the things which you can learn at one time. It's comes by practicing, and you must adopting the thing. It's a process of both personal and cultural maturation. It comes from your culture, whatever culture you got from your parents or your society, that's inculcated in you. So the ethics is not the way you are just thinking in at one point. It comes automatically when you got it in practice. You got learn from your parents, your teacher, your surrounding person. So it's a very small word, but meaning is a very big, a lot. So it's not very easy to understand. But compromise with the ethical values, and they are trying to that ethical value for one person is different and the ethical values for the other person is different. Sometimes like one person is saying that this work is good for me or okay for me, but that is the same work is done by another person. They can blame or they can do the anything. That is why this is ethically, there is a differences. If ethics is one, then it should be universal. I don't think that should be vary from one person to another person.
Thank you very much. When I try and relate this to our topic, Bildung, there are many things coming to my mind here. One is I'm systemically, from a systemic perspective, incapable of being completely ethical. My whole life is depending on exploitation of others. That's one really a big problem I have to face every day. I have to live with that. The moment I buy stuff, I really know who has produced it. I know when I buy stuff in the supermarket that almost 30 to 40% is going to waste, stuff like that. People are suffering from this. That is one problem. The other is with exploitation comes traumatization. And traumatization sometimes leads to not being capable any longer to even think ethically, to lose everything you learned in your culture, in your family, etc. And one more thing, existential crisis. When people are in existential crisis and they have no other choice than to do something unethical, and the question is living or dying, I think most people will decide very clearly to try and stay alive. Yeah. So Bildung in my universe starts with unconditionally basic income. Yeah, to help people all over the globe in the very end to not have to suffer any longer in a world full of abundance of almost everything. We are building machines helping with everything. AI and robotics will create even a better place if we take the responsibility up that with technology comes responsibility for the poor. Yeah, that's the very idea why we created it in the very first place, that we do not have to work so much any longer. That is why we started to develop tools, why we started to automatize. That was the plan. And where are we now? We are working the same amount of time, sometimes even more. Many people started to exploit themselves, not only others. The exploitation is now coming back to us with ideas of work philosophy, work ethics, purpose. Yeah, you have to find purpose in your work while you're working for a credit institute that is threatening people by their very existential, by their very existence. Yeah, so I think ethics is a very important topic, but also a very practical topic that starts with the question: what do people need actually to live an ethical life?
Well, Plato said that philosophy is not for the hungry.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to that. And yet, I would say that not everyone can be a Cato, as they used to say in Rome, or not everyone can be a Socrates, as I say sometimes. But when he had the choice of whether to walk away because his students had bribed the prison guard, and he could walk away from a hemlock poisoning death sentence and live happily somewhere outside of Athens, he chose to abide by the sentence of his favorite city, and in contrast to what you said, Gitta, he chose death. And he said that there's several reasons for that. One is that the sole reason of philosophy is to prepare oneself for death. Another one was that, according to Socrates at least, another one was that, and that's where Steve's argument gets support, is that people don't do any harm out of knowledge. They do it out of ignorance because they don't know any better. And sometimes that knowledge, and that connects to Epicureanism later on, is that sometimes what is harder in the short run is a lot better in the long run. And that knowledge allows us to make a decision which is better in the long run, even if it's not better for us in the short run, and even if it means death. Because one of the main reasons why we know Socrates today, and one he's considered the father figure of philosophy in the Western world at least, is not very differentiated too far away from the manner of his death, because that kind of solidified to what kind of a person he was and what kind of a philosopher he was. Because later on Aristotle was a little bit concerned about his safety, and he didn't hesitate even a little bit, and he was independently wealthy, and he left, so that, as he said, lest the Athenians sin against philosophy for a second time. So he valued his personal safety and freedom obviously a lot higher than Socrates did, you know. So, but yet, for someone like me, it means that it's possible. And to me, ethics is precisely about that, personally. Ethics is making the right choice even when it doesn't pay to do that choice, even when it's dangerous, even when it's economically unjustified, and even when it's an extreme situation. And yes, Gitta, I would agree with you that there are many extreme situations and then people have trauma. But you know, I have had my share of trauma in this life, and I remember when I was in the army, I was a 19-year-old kid, and there were a number of situations when I wasn't sure if I'm gonna make it. There were several times when I actually thought I'm not gonna make it. And one thing that actually really impressed me and that I learned in that extreme situation was that there is almost no correlation between intelligence and ethics. So in other words, you can have some people who are dumb as a doorknob, forgive me for saying, and yet somehow they have the personal zeitgeist or something, I don't know how to say it, the personal creed and backbone to do the right thing. And then you have other people who are very, very, very smart, very intelligent, who would do well in life, who would do well at work, and yet they use that intelligence to do things which are at best gray area and at worst cowardice and just doing what's best for them but endangering everybody else.
Yes.
And that's the situation where I meant that you can do the right thing even in an extreme situation. It's not easy, but you can do it, and people do it. And that's not a matter of how smart you are. That's a matter of how committed you are to doing the right thing.
It's the same thing with concept clarity. I've often seen that people, you call them dumb as a doorknob. I would say they're just think simpler, have often a more direct approach on clear concepts. I've seen that often, and with our research, I've often seen, and now I don't say Bildung, I say education, that education actually stands in the way of concept clarity. Yes, I totally agree with you that it is possible. But when it comes to people, I don't, from my perspective, I don't want to go there and tell them what is possible for them. I just have a look at what is going on out there. And when I see that, I see many people suffering from a lack of ethical conceptualization because they have existential problems, are traumatized, etc. When I go to them and tell them you can do it otherwise, I need to use some narration, and I have to give them something, a social community, an atmosphere of safety, something like that, in order for them to get rid of angst, of the ignorance that is causing them trouble. And of course, I think the biggest fear now on this planet right now is the fear of being seen as someone who is making mistakes and as someone who is not worthy. And that leads people very, very often to do the most strangest things, to engage in symmetrical conflicts and to become extremists where they started as ordinary children. Yeah, and ethics is a luxury in some way. Yes, you are right. We can do it, but we do not live in a society that actually values values.
Too true. Too true. I would like to take this opportunity perhaps to shift things, because I think one value we probably all have is the value of education, because that seems, as one or more people have said, that feeds into a lot of everything else. And this thought or this question was inspired to me by Sandeep's presentation, is that it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of volunteers to get education of any kind going in some places. Meanwhile, there's places where there are fantastic innovations in education. And my book is on sale now. No. From all quarters, whether we're talking various intelligences or learning modalities, all sorts of techniques, and the availability, all this going on, and yet we still have a crisis of education. So rather than talk about what's getting in the way of that, because we can all point the fingers at the bad forces in the world that are working against education. And some of us saw this decades ago. Oh, let's cut. The schools have too much money. Let's cut that money. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is not going to turn out well. I hate it when I'm right. Has not worked out well at all. But to ask ourselves, if we want to develop better education, to start education as an autopoietic system, as a self-growing system, what might we do to start it going and growing so that it spreads like ripples on a pond, so that it becomes its own self-growing network of education? Is that too large of a question?
That's exactly what we are trying to do here.
So tell
So
me,
how do we make it energize itself, so we don't have to keep pushing that, to go philosophical, Nicola, so we don't have to keep pushing that stone up the mountain? How do we get it to roll uphill all by itself?
right? And that's why, by the way, I love the whole idea, the whole concept of Bildung, and it makes me very sad that it's very kind of, it's not a popular concept. Most people in the world have never heard of it. And actually, my best friend from high school is German now, has been German now for over 25 years, because I went to the army and he went to Germany to study. And he was telling me that even in Germany, for many people, maybe of our generation, maybe younger people, Bildung simply means education, normal education. It doesn't have any of the historical context that originates from early 19th century and so on. So all that the good stuff is all gone. So it's kind of normalized and trivialized, unfortunately, even in Germany. And that makes me very sad. So how are we going to popularize this concept across the world if in Germany it seems to be on the decline, if what I hear is correct? And the way I think we should do it is first by asking the question that I was trying to ask, and of course that's a proposal. You may or may not agree with it, but it's figuring out what is education for. Because these people in the 19th century, they had a view that education is for producing workers and consumers, and they accomplished what they set out for themselves. They did that extremely well. We're still paying the price for it today. So the question is, if we want to change that, we have to give a different reason, a different modus operandi. What is education for? And I'm open to hear.
From my perspective, first, self-emancipation. Everybody wants to feel safe and happy, wants to live a meaningful life, and wants to have good relationships and a stable income. And with creating a platform, we hope that we will support this, where everybody can come and learn with each other, with everybody else. But I think first we will create some sort of elite, but in the very best way of meaning of this word, where people come together who really still wants to learn. The biggest problem here in Germany right now is that people are in fear of learning. They fear learning so much that the moment they are come in contact with someone knowing more than them, they try and say you're arrogant or something like that, because they feel guilty not to as if it is a competition. They cannot hold their ground. So the very first people I think will come to Bildung are people who understand that for a better world, they have to become better person, which means that they have to heal, yeah, in every aspect of their lives, and who know that they cannot do that alone. And the number of people understanding that are growing by the day. And the fascinating thing to me is they are growing everywhere on this planet.
So is that phenomenon that you just described to us about how those people are feeling, is that intergenerational? Is that a generational issue? Like, is that with younger people only, or is it like middle-aged, older people, or is it everyone across the board?
As far as I can see it, it's everyone on the across the board, even people in their 70s, 80s, etc. I hear that from very young, from children up to very old people. I think it's a fundamental need of getting sense into all of this. That's what I see. And there's another thing. People are coming to an understanding that they cannot do something here without affecting something there. They understand that they are part of a bigger system and try to change their lives in order to help changing the lives of others. That's another part of it. When Sandeep and I first met on Facebook, we talked about stuff like that, how important it is for children in India, for example, to learn with children in Germany and Japan and Uruguay at the same time in the same language, so they can learn to understand the cultural values of each other. Many people today say cultural values are traditional and wrong, etc. I do not believe that. It's the same with individuality. Every individual has the right to his or her individuality. The problem is not that we are separated from each other. The problem is we are related to each other, and that means we have to understand that the other one is actually another one. Yeah, can you follow me? I'm a little bit tired. I'm in fear of rumbling here.
It kind of reminded me to one Zen master who was asked about, teacher, what do we do about the others? And he said, there are no others.
Yeah.
So I think that's what kind of you're getting at, if I get it right.
Both. I mean, there are no others, and at the same time, the other one is someone I do not know. I really do not know. That is the very foundation of communication, to understand that I do not know you. You have your own space. I have this picture that we all are stars in this infinite universe, and everyone is shining brightly. And via communication, ordinarily, people try to come closer and closer and closer and closer to each other, and burning themselves up in a big explosion, because they do not understand that when they step a little bit back, they can see the other is a star too, in its own sphere, with his own gravity, etc., etc. So keeping the distance is another aspect of Bildung, is another aspect of understanding systemics. Yeah.
I really, Steve, sorry, you first.
Part of what's being said resonates with me, because for possibly forever, America has had an anti-intellectual undercurrent, and that's just been exacerbated when you hear stories of an entrepreneur. I think Kinko's started out this way. Well, I went to college and I've realized, oh, I have a great invention, so I'll just drop out of college and make $1 billion. And a lot of people listen to that story and say, oh, well, the lesson they come away with is that they don't have to go to college. They don't have to learn anything. They just, somehow this magical thing happens and they become billionaires. So
we end up with move fast and break things.
Yeah, yeah.
And this reminds me of globalization, Steve. If I might interrupt, globalization was always reason for war. Yeah, globalization is the moment when we understand that we can communicate with each other. And that exactly is the moment where differences start to become visible. Yeah, and that is the moment where we have to talk about them. Integration is not something we pull people in and now they are German and that's it. It's the moment where new conflicts are arising, and that is at the moment where the system can start to differentiate. But if people are not educated, gebildet enough to understand that when they open their borders, this means that they invite people in for communication, then we have a problem. And that is a global problem.
I quite agree. It goes back to a cultural imperative of, when we see somebody different, do we automatically say, oh, that's a different person, we have to get rid of them as quickly as possible? Or do we say, oh, there's somebody that I might be able to learn from? And I'm not sure where that came from or where we can go with it, but the opportunity for us to communicate, to integrate, to synthesize our understanding is the only way we're going to improve this world. Because there's no one of us can do it alone. I think, and that to me is one of the greatest opportunities for the FORMWELT platform, is the ability to connect people all over the world. So right. If I'm in California and I connect, if I'm a child in California connecting with a child in India and in Germany, and we can all communicate and say, hey, wait a minute, this looks like there's something important going on here. Let's do these things that are interrelated. Now we have, from combining our varied perspectives, we're able to understand the global situation and we're able to take coordinated action. And then we have a chance, I think, to really witness the remaking of the world.
Yeah, and I don't believe that that is something we should leave to governments, because governments always are rigid and slow. Yeah, they come from a completely different era. They have a completely different communication structure. When politics, at this moment, America, the United States are the best example for what has happened to politics. It is all about symmetrical conflicts. There is no chance for change as long as the people stay in these conflicts. That's a big problem. And when we leave change to governments, when we leave change to science, with science we have the same problem, partly, not everywhere, but especially in humanities, we have this problem that humanities is thinking about the contradiction brings the whole thing forward. Yes, true, but also creative conflict means to actually listen and integrate what the other has said into what you are developing here, and that does not happen very often. So that also means Bildung, and I think what Sandeep is doing there in India is really, really amazing. And I'm very impressed about people having actually a completely other career and then say, so stop. Yeah, I cannot do this any longer because I have problems. I see problems right here in front of my eyes. And I first have to change them, because when I do not do this, who else will?
Yeah, because whatever we got from society, so it's our duty now to return back the society whatever we have. So it's everyone's moral duty.
Yeah, thank you.
And Sandeep, I think you mentioned the sound quality is not good, but I think you mentioned an old approach to education where the students live with the teacher. Very interesting. And I'm wondering if that might create the foundation for a new model for learning. And yeah. I'm thinking in my mind that might also tie in with what Nicola mentioned about Ubuntu, where it's all, you know, the whole village is working together to support each other. Whether education and health and prosperity and all of that, is there the opportunity for some synthesis of those ideas, I wonder?
Yeah, that's true.
And that was kind of, by the way, Socrates used to spend enormous amount of time with his students, which is one of the charges in the court pressed against him, was that he was, quote, corrupting the youth. But this is a tradition, there's a tradition of this also in Japan. For example, in martial arts, there's the so-called uchi deshi, which is a life-in student who goes into the teacher's home or dojo, who lives there, who sleeps there, who cleans, and basically is a live-in student and spends, you know, 10 years, sometimes 20 years back in the days, does whatever the teacher says, never gets paid for his work, but just for that education, to learn there non-stop. So that's kind of, there's long tradition across the world for that. But another thing that Bildung has, another dimension, which I really like, is that, you know, the world is not a spectator sport. It's not a soap opera that we watch on TV, that we have to be proactive and engage. That we're not, you know, passive spectators in this kind of TV drama called COVID-19 or nuclear weapons or environmental disaster or climate change or whatever issue you want, racism, whatever issue you want to pick, that we can actually engage and we can actually make a difference. And that's part of the holistic people who we are, and it's part of our education, and I think that's something to keep in mind, and that I really like, that we, you know, we're not just passive TV viewers on this soap opera called Global Affairs.
Right.
Yeah, and the other way around for children becoming teachers of adults. Yeah, that is also an idea I followed through over the years. In Germany, I think when you try to popularize the idea of pupils living with their teachers, you might become, you might endeavor the experience that people are telling you that you are actually fundamentalizing a cult. Yeah. I think that will happen. We thought about this. So I think the better way is to start with an online platform that makes things easier.
Yeah.
Because what you said, Nicola, about Socrates and the youth, that's also something that happens to societies who are leaving the Bildung path, that they become obsessive of their children and do not wish that for them to have a better education, Bildung, than they have. Yeah, that's another conflict. Yeah, it's not nice, but it's a fact. Yeah.
So is it the case, is it true that the concept of Bildung in Germany is getting emptied of its origins, of its roots? It's true?
Yeah, it's true. For many years now. Yeah, it is. It is still in Sweden that it's a little bit alive there, even better in Norway. In Germany, the whole educational system has become very rigid and market orientated. So the children are going to school in order for having a good job later, not even knowing if these jobs will still exist when they leave school or the world is still in place. Yeah, so It's insane, and it's a sad thing, and we have observed it for 30 years now. That was one of the many reasons why we started with our research, because this was the inevitable income output. As long as there is wealth enough not to feel the need to become confronted with the problem, yeah, as long as that happens, the society is declining. It's an historical fact. It's happened over and over and over again.
That's perfect. So I was just thinking that it seems that the general idea that, oh, I can get an education and I can improve my life, that's going to be an idea that emerges in a society that is growing, expanding. There's more opportunities, there's more options. That's not in, you know, traditional agrarian culture where you're going to just do exactly the same that your parents did and there's no other options. So it kind of makes sense to another thing that was said previously, this feeling of helplessness on the part of many people. Why should I bother getting an education? The world is in decline. I just need to get as many guns as possible. And I know people in Canada that do that also. But the ability to make a difference in the world comes from, to a great extent, having the education, the understanding of the connections in the world and how you can find those leverage points, how you can make things happen for people. On the other hand, I've known people who have said, I don't want my children to be educated. Education brings unhappiness. I want my children to be happy idiots. That's my preference. And that's frightening to me. Talk about a very different cultural perspective.
A Stoic philosopher would say that I deem you unfortunate because you've never met misfortune, because you've never been tested. So you yourself don't even know what you're capable of doing, because the only way that you can learn that is when you meet misfortune. And if you haven't met it, you are very unfortunate. So when misfortune came to the Stoics, they welcomed it because it tested their mettle, it tested their daily practice of philosophy, and it made them learn about who they are.
That resonates very strongly. What that brings to mind, strangely enough, is two very different situations. One, you were in the military. You went through basic training, and you had the drill instructor yelling at you, and more than a little bit. But what that gives to most people eventually is a sense of strength and empowerment. Say, oh yes, I can do something. The idea behind military training, you break you down and then build you back up again so that you feel you can accomplish something. Now, hopefully we do this with good parenting, but that's a whole nother area of knowledge. But that also relates to the challenge. And one of my visions for the future is based on fiction, is the sort of Star Trek future, where we have the abundance and we recognize it and we embrace the diversity, but that's not enough. Going out into the universe and finding those challenges is, I agree, a very important thing. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for a newer kind of school system that I don't know if we exactly want to have drill sergeants yelling at the students quite so much, but to build them up in some way, more perhaps through positive parenting skills, providing the education and encouraging them to go out into the world and find challenges and then bring them back to the classroom, share them with other students, so that we develop a more integrated system of learning and action. Yeah.
The thing is, children do all that. Yeah, they go out, they explore, they do dangerous things, they engage in negative emotion, etc., etc. This is some. I think we do not have only to think about what we have to do or can do, but what we have to not do any longer in order to not make out of our children people like us in fear of learning and fear of engaging into the direct communication with others, etc. What are we doing to our children right now that prevents them from staying the explorers that they are?
And some schools are doing this very well. There's schools where fairly young children control part of the school budget, and they will say, oh, well, we're learning about this topic. Let's go find an expert in the community and bring them back in to help us to learn about this. So again, there's a lot of great stuff going on there, but it's not expanding to the wider world. And I wonder why not.
So I think actually Socrates did that very well. And we're kind of doing it today, but Socrates did it incredibly well. So why are we kind of producing the same kind of children, or we get the same result on a mass scale? It's because we have industrial education. And as I said, industrial education that's focused on answers and throwing them up a week or two later on the test. And it used to drive me nuts when I was in university when some of my colleagues would ask, is this going to be on the test? And to me, that shows like complete lack of awareness of why we are supposed to be there. And yet, in many cases, those students were very, very successful, very successful. And in university, I did very well, but I had a couple of cases when I didn't do very well, precisely because I pushed back. And in the army, I did terribly because I was the most punished and the most rewarded soldier, because I was able to complete tasks, but I was known for questioning authority. And if you're in the Bulgarian army and you question a direct order, you can be either incarcerated, as I often was, or in some situations you can be shot on the spot. And imagine my sergeant was like taken directly from Stanley Kubrick's movie Full Metal Jacket. That kind of character was my first sergeant when I was a rookie. That kind of character. So I don't think they had it. The goal of the army is to brainwash a bunch of young, hormone-overwhelmed, uneducated people to kill without much guilt, to industrialize mass murder. That's the point of the army. No matter how many times they tell you we're here to save lives, the reality is very different. But the way Socrates did it was very different, and it worked very well, because the reason why Socrates is considered to be the father figure of Western philosophy is because he gave birth to all kinds of philosophical schools. The Cyrenaics, the hedonists, the Epicureans, the Stoics even, the Platonists, of course, the Aristotelians even, all of them originate from Socrates, and each of those schools took something different. And the reason why they were able to do that is the following. As Socrates said, he never taught anyone anything, except for that one time, but it was about love. But that doesn't count. So he never taught anyone anything. So what he did was he organized a symposium. And symposium in ancient Greek basically means a drinking party. And basically the point is a bunch of people get together in an informal atmosphere where they eat and drink and while discussing very important topics. Topics such as Bildung, topics such as law, friendship, love, death, piety, philosophy, beauty, ethics, aesthetics, you name it. And the idea was that in the end of the day, Socrates didn't tell people what to do or what to think, because he saw himself as what he called a midwife he saw himself as a midwife, in other words, as helping people to give birth to their own decisions, to their own ideas. And the symposium was that forum where people came in to learn and hopefully give birth to their own ideas. And this is what happened. Eventually, all this, potpourri, mosaic of philosophical schools, which are mutually incompatible quite often, by the way, they're all, ascending from Socrates. And so that's the strength, I think, that you can do. That kind of symposium, that's why I love that idea of a symposium, which is what we're kind of having it online right now, but it's only online and we're not drinking, but it's kind of the same idea. And hopefully each one of us would live with a new awareness. And most importantly, I hope the people who watch this either live or later on would take something away from this. And that's where the strength of philosophy comes, 2,400 years later. Those simple things are the simple things, and as I said, all my respect to Kant. He's way too smart for me, and I don't speak German, so in English, he's untranslatable from what I hear, So all my respect to him, but I stick to the simple stuff that I can do today, every day in my life. And that's like how those people lived and died. And I think we can do it today, and we would be better for it if we were to do it.
Yeah.
I quite agree. And a very short story in support of that. I was working on my undergraduate degree in sociology in night school and sitting in the front of the class saying, well, this is great. Give me more, give me more, give me. I think, oh, maybe someday I could grow up to be a professor. And I looked to the back of the class and everybody else was asleep. No, there's no way I'm going to stand up in front of a class and lecture to sleeping people. No. But when I went for my master's degree in organization development, I learned all sorts of collaborative techniques and self-directed learning, collaborative learning, all those wonderful things, very much along the lines of the symposium that you're talking about, that are tremendously fantastic. So I wonder if we're starting to see these things, and we're sort of living in a sort of post-industrial age where we're starting to get away from manufacturing because more and more of it's done by robots. Is this educational shift towards something more collaborative, something that's going to happen? Is this a wave of change that we're just part of? And so how long is it going to take?
I think yes. What us humans differentiates from machines is our capability of chaos management. Yes, we are creative, we can embrace the undetermined, and that is exactly what is now needed from every human being on this planet. Yeah, his or her super intelligence, super creativity, etc. And that is what we have to foster. Yeah, that is what we have to think about. Versatile thinkers. Versatile people. The industrial era was all about mechanization. In humans also, with the according science, that has changed. And it has changed 100 years ago. Yeah, this is not something new. We are talking about quantum physics. We are talking about relativity theory. We're talking about system theory, constructivism, all stuff that happened while industrialization further and further went into automatization with machines that can take more and more and more of our jobs. And that's a good thing. Yeah, but we have to understand that it is a good thing, and we have to ask the very, very question: what is the conditio humana? Who are we? We as a race, as a species, who are we, and who are we as an individual? And that is the fundamental question of Bildung. And that is, I think, what Sandeep is doing in India. They are supporting the individual. Yeah.
And let me bring that a little more to India and about the power of the small decisions. One of my heroes is Gandhi. And, yes, we have some big decisions and complex thinking and this and that. But there's enormous power in our small choices and small decisions. You know, Gandhi challenged the British Empire with salt. Okay, with salt. So now Gitta was sharing with us that you know, it is very challenging to live, and we are very all very spoiled compared to Sandeep, because Sandeep deals with daily challenges that we take for granted. And this is where Gitta's point comes about, you know, people's background, you know, because no matter the choices I made, and I may be proud of, I was very fortunate to be born where I was born, in the family I was born, to go in the best high school in Bulgaria, which allowed me then to go to universities in the States and then Canada, and to end up doing what I'm doing, which would never have happened if I haven't had all that good fortune, right? But taking your other point, Gitta, about the fact that we live on top of a system and that you can't be perfect. Yes, it's true, we can't be perfect, but we can strive to be better. And let me show you another small, and I don't want to proselytize here, but I just want to share with you my journey. So I don't want to convert anyone per se, just to share my journey. So Gandhi challenged the British Empire with making salt and breaking the law that way. 4.5 years ago, me and my wife went vegan. Because if you want to make a small difference for the climate, for the animals themselves, and by the way, for your own health, that doesn't require regulation, doesn't require government approval, doesn't cost you anything, and possibly puts extra money in your budget, because it's cheaper to be vegan than to be a meat eater and cheese eater. Especially I'm Bulgarian, so I used to have a thing for expensive Swiss cheeses. Those are very expensive. They're delicious, but they're very expensive. But, you know, we made that choice 4.5 years ago, and that's a choice that has a direct positive repercussions throughout the whole system that we can make. And the same applies to consumerism, you know. I'm working now on shrinking all my luggage to 1 suitcase. I'm currently down to 2 suitcases. So I still have 1 more to go, and they're, granted, they're, you know, bigger than medium size, so I have to check those out. But my goal is that in another 5 or 10 years, when I wear the clothes that I have, I would be able to fit all of my clothes and all of my shoes, maybe even, in a big suitcase, and that would be it. I don't need anything else. And, you know, things like that, you know, do make a difference. And, you know, my life is easier and it is lighter, and I don't have to make choices about a wardrobe of 20 t-shirts or 20 stupid shirts that nobody cares about and remembers about. Not to mention the fact that slave labor in Bangladesh probably had to do the cotton, which was stuffed with pesticides, which poisoned the local water reservoir and all of that. And so we can make all those small choices, and that's why I say our ethics can be a daily practice. It's an imperfect practice. It's a flawed practice, but it can be a daily practice, and it does make a difference both personally and collectively.
Thank you very much, Nicola. This was a great thoughts of all of you, and you have such a fruitful discussion. So you make a very, very easy job for Martin and myself tonight. I really I'm curious what's going on in your mind, Sandeep, because you're very, very quiet, and I'd love to hear some words from you as well.
You're muted,
you mute?
Unmute. Yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I was hearing to Nicola, Steve, and Gitta, and, you know, comes to know a lot of things which is really required for, you know, development building to, you know, education system reforming. And the people are just, most of the people, even I can see in my surrounding that they are trying to get an education, and then to get a job, and then to get a settlement. Thus, very few people are just trying to use that education for the social benefit, that use of that education ethically. I'm not saying that the people who are getting education for job is not ethical, but I mean to say that they keep their moral values reserved till the end. And because sometimes when people are just in a business or in a bureaucracy, then they must, I think, I'm not saying all the people, but someone has compromised with their ethics, and they compromise with their moral values. So I don't think that should be so. As Nicola was saying, that the person should have the money when like one can survive with a good food, good house, and good thing. Nothing is more important than this. I mean, we cannot think about that we have such a bank balance in my account, because no one have any confident or have any complete certification that tomorrow, nobody can say for next minute what will happen. So whatever the time is right now, we need to effort as much as we can to make ourselves better, make the society better, make our neighbor better. So always try to think positive to make building our ethical values. So I think that is our this concept for this meeting and this conference and this session of this meeting. So thank you.
And taking that thought from you, Sandeep, about the fact that maybe we don't need so much to be happy, like a bank account and stuff, it reminded me to Epicurus, who's not a Stoic, but one of my favorite guys still, who said, "Give me a pot of cheese and I can compete with Zeus on happiness." So, you know, he was one of those philosophers. Get just a pot of cheese, some water, and some bread, and he can compete on happiness with the gods.
Right.
You know, not quite vegan, but still very, very impressive for me, you know.
Right.
So, and I can, you know, I can relate to the love of cheese, so I can respect that myself.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said about that, and you know, consumerism is a relatively new phenomenon. It's an invention of the Industrial Revolution, and before that, you know, the king's possessions were many times any king's possession in, let's say, the Middle Ages, or even in the 15th and 16th century before the Renaissance. Many kings had fewer possessions than what we in the West have today in our houses, right? Because many houses are like, you know, like palaces nowadays. And I know, Sandeep, that's terrible for me to say this, because that's like our disease here in the West, but and you struggle with a very different reality over there. That's why my respect goes all to you, because you test yourself all the time, my friend, and you know what you're capable of, and you know what you've really accomplished, and you can be proud of it, and you can have self-confidence in life.
Yeah.
But many of us here, I find, especially people who are kind of born with it quite often, they may not have an appreciation. You know, it's like, I have an appreciation for being Canadian. You know why? Because I am a Canadian by choice, not by birth. I never had the good fortune to be born here, but I had to fight to get here. And actually, my army captain told me that I'm garbage when I was in the army, and that I would never be accepted in a university abroad, and that I would never be allowed to leave the country. And I told him in front of everybody that I'm going to send him a postcard. And guess what? The first thing I did when I went to Washington, D.C. was I sent somebody a postcard. So that was my terrible self-gratifying revenge. But it's just to say that, you know, when you struggle, when you meet misfortune, you become fortunate in that misfortune,
Right.
that you appreciate where you are, where you've gotten, and who you are, and how much it's costed you to get there. And that's a fortune, and that's wealth, and that's priceless.
Right.
I can completely relate to that. The decision we made back then 30 years ago was not easy. It wasn't an easy choice to dedicate our whole life to this research, not knowing if this in the end will be accepted by mankind. So we had to struggle, and we often have stood for the situation to become homeless even, because it was hard, but we kept on going because somehow, from my perspective, my life is not very much worth when I don't do stuff that is something that can help mankind to survive, and not only to survive, but to survive constructively and with a future worthwhile living. So this whole event is a meeting of the most extraordinary people, and I'm really happy about this. And I think this talk was a very impressive one, and of high quality in almost every aspect, from the aspect of morals, of humanity, of ethics, of intelligence, of creativity, etc. I'm really grateful that you found the time and life's energy to participate in this.
Yes, really great. Thank you, Gitta.
Thank you, Gitta, and thank you, guys, because without you, this wouldn't have happened. So you are the hosts of this symposium, and you deserve the credit for it, because all the benefits that would stem from here thereon would not have existed. You created those. You created the environment within which those were given birth to, and so you deserve the credit. So thank you.
Exactly. So big and foremost.
Deeply appreciate the invitation, and this for me, my notes, etc., is like coming to a feast. I could just feed on ideas alone. So this has been a gourmet feast for me. Thank you.
So I also I was excited to be part of this lean-based conference when I communicated with the Gitta, and she accepted my request to include me as a speaker, because I would like to speak on this international conference, and she humbly accepted my request, and I'm really grateful. And I got the opportunity to interact with Nicole, Steve, and all the experts from the different fields. So it's my pleasure, and I would love to keep going such type of conferences so that we can connect globally and do the change on the global basis.
That is the idea behind it, that we make something regular out of this, that we meet twice a year or 4 times a year and explore further ideas and mix things a little up so we can talk to the other groups growing. And I hope that the different currents we are trying to bring together here start to communicate more with each other. It's a really sad thing, especially when I look at Nicola and Steve, that the transhumanists, for example, and the systems thinkers are not really very good related to each other. I know many system thinkers knowing next to nothing about technology, about modern technology and what is going on out there. And I know many people fascinating by modern technology with a strictly materialistic universe. So it's a good idea to engage into the future by bringing people together from various fields of expertise, even people, as we had in the last conference, that is activists working on the streets to help people to understand that climate change needs them. Yeah, that is a thing that confronts us all, and not only the people with an academic background. Yeah, and many thanks to Kristin and Martin for being so patient with us discussing these topics and organizing this so very well. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm quite honored.
It was an honor for
I thankful to Martin and Kristin and all the organizing committee, because without them it is not possible. So I really thanks and namaste to all of you.
And I would like finally to thank the 2 Dominics in the chat and YouTube. They were discussing very intensely what you were discussing. And I think it's worth reading the chat later on. And there are some more aspects which we could not have a look at or put a light on. But if we have a next opportunity for a conference or a hackathon or something like this, we might take these into consideration as well and try to work them out.
Martin, these chats, can they be saved so we can make snapshots, so we can put them up on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever?
They're part of the YouTube video now.
I think,
so.
yeah,
They would stay there forever.
Right.
Very good.
Yes,
very
yes.
good.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, because without the audience, we are nothing. And there are people watching on Leanbase. It's not only YouTube. The YouTube channel I gave out in my small community, but I think there are more people watching online on Leanbase. So I will inform Leanbase, the team of Leanbase, that there was a really, really good chat. Thanks to the Dominics.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, all of you.
So let's call it a night. Yeah.
Call it a night. So if you want if you don't have enough for today, Nicola is sometimes more on other panels tomorrow. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock our time, we start again and we end up at 11 p.m. our time. So the whole day there are further dialogues, very interesting as well, and great speakers. And also on Sunday at 9, Leadership in Crisis. So if you're interested, we are really happy to see you again or see you chatting intensive your thoughts if you're not a speaker in the panel.
I'm looking forward to all the other sessions. I think it's only going to get better from now on.
Is this possible?
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Sleep
you all.
tight.
Okay, namaste to all of you.
Have a good night.
Namaste. Thank you, Sandeep, Nicola.
Namaste.
Thank you, Steve, and Kristin, and Martin.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good.